Playboi Carti's music has hit the zeitgeist right on the head. The numbers tell. He's the first artist in history to have an album go #1 in over 100 countries. He's the 7th biggest Spotify debut of all time. You would think that for an album to be this big, it needs to be perfect. Because after all, an album is deemed good or bad based on its quality, right? Well, it's not quite so simple. I mean, I know we're all familiar with the idea that mid music can blow up, but still, the albums that have been praised by internet groups, you look at Twisted Fantasy, you look at Chromacopia, you look at Rodeo, these are all exceptional albums, and yet music is so all over the place in quality. And so how did we end up here? How is this album that has some quality in there but is still very, very messy, how did that end up right at the top? To understand this, I think we can look at 3 albums and put them on what I like to call the energy chart, with popularity on the y-axis and the quality of the music on the x-axis. Now you'll see that the quality section is at its widest in the middle, and to understand why that is, we need to have a look at the album that sits in that position. So, in the words of that album's creator, let's not take any more time. What's the rush? Mutt by Leon Thomas is a phenomenal album. All of those things that make Twisted Fantasy, Chromacopia, etc. great apply to Mutt. Great lyricism, great storytelling, great production, great sequencing. All the formalities are there. And the album is being appreciated for those qualities. The quality of the music is in large part helping Mutt to achieve that position of popular acclaim. But that's not the only thing that's getting it there. Leon has a lot going for him other than the music. A crucial way in which he also hits the zeitgeist on the head is by bringing nostalgia. It has that classic R&B sound written all over it. A sound that is also freaky. Leon himself is a part of that nostalgia. He comes from that Nickelodeon world from our childhoods. That nostalgia is such an important part of bringing Mutt into the zeitgeist, and a massive part of why Leon is already a big name that is familiar to us. We want big names. Familiarity. That is really the currency. This is again linking back to Carti. We're so ready to see someone that we've known and a familiar face win because everyone around us also wants that. We want community. But Leon is not quite at the level of fame where he can put anything out. He still sits in that indie level of fame where he has this hit that's blowing up, you'll hear it on the radio a million times, and he's working with all sorts of big artists, SZA, Ty Dolla $ign, etc. But he's not quite at the levels of fame of those people, so he sits quite nicely in that I listen to indie but it's Tame Impala space, which itself is also a very recent position that you can be in. That being able to be in that position is quite a recent thing that has come about because of streaming era, which again, he's benefiting from the zeitgeist there. But because he's not at that level of popularity, he's not a big enough name for us to eat up anything that he puts out regardless of quality. And hence why it was very important that his album had to be exceptional. And that's why it lands in the middle of this chart, because truthfully, the other part about albums that rely so much on their quality is that everyone has taste. Some people are going to resonate exactly with what Leon is doing on this album, but others aren't going to connect with it. Everyone wants to get invested in a world, but if that world is in the music and the music isn't to your taste, you're naturally going to leave people behind. And so that wide section of the diamond there, that is what's keeping those albums at that status, because they have to grapple with all of this varying range of opinions. And so if the artist wants to get bigger in popularity, they're going to start needing to make a world through other ways. And as you'll see with Carti, the number one way to do that is by image. And this is where we get into music, because I believe that Carti not only rejects the idea of trying to make music of good quality, but he has made an entire career and an entire way of releasing music that is built off of rejecting that philosophy. You get the sense that Carti just wants to release music. And of course, the way to mass release music is through an album. And so, because we have all this experience with good albums, we instinctually try and rate any album that we see, including I Am Music, on that scale of is it good, is it not? And so all of a sudden, people are confused by this thing because it rejects that. Music refuses to be put in that box because on the one hand, he is borrowing from those philosophies. Pop Out is a good album opener. South Atlanta Baby borrows from the ideas of what an album outro should be. It's quite celebratory. The Swamp Izzo tags, Swamp Izzo! That's a very album thing. We're talking about like DJ Drama on Call Me If You Get Lost. But then at the same time, he completely rejects that with the awkward pacing, poor quality music at times. Really, once you get into the album, after being about 20 tracks in, you forget the kind of beginning, middle, and end structure, and it's just this wall of music that's hitting you, that's relentless, and you're just to quote KSI, you're in the thick of it so much that you can't see the wood for the trees, and you're just surrounded by music. Hence, I Am Music. And so at that point, Carti knows that having high-quality music only matters to a certain level of fame. He's cultivated a cult fan base based off of his high quality music that he was making in the early stages of his career. He's using that cult status and backing to then catapult into this new era where he, as the persona, holds enough weight to give us that world that we can live in. Give us those personable connections, those human connections that we so want out of music. Carti gives us a world of vampires and goons and face paint and black clothing. He gives us that world that we can really live in. That is more important than the quality of the music itself. We can see the same thing with Brat. Brat actually is high quality music, almost undebatably. But again, the reason that album has had staying power is because of the lime green, Brat aesthetic, Brat word, the cultural statement. All of that is a world that the fans get to live in. And that type of parasocial connection and that world that we're immersed in, we genuinely want that more than good quality music. Except when we get that from music, we think that it's because the music itself is good, when it's actually the world building, which is another skill entirely. I'll put a couple of other albums on this chart for you to see how this works. You can see that as you go from the mutt level up to the music level, where the quality starts to become less important, you'll see albums that might be okay, but prioritize that kind of digestibility and human connection more than the actual quality of their music, because as we found out with Mutt's case, if we take a look at Leon Thomas's position at the moment, he is going to have to completely fulcrum his approach to making music if he wants to be at that Carti level. And the truth is, I don't think he wants to be. I think he's reached a position where his talents as a musician and as a communicator, as a speaker, are being rewarded. And then he gets to connect with fans on a lot more of an intimate level, playing smaller shows. Whereas to get to that other level of fame, you would need to start developing skills of marketing and leveraging factors outside of your actual music production to get you to the places that you want to be. And so this shows us where our energy lies. This diamond shows us where our energy is and how much energy we are able to give to certain qualities in music. The better the music is, the less space that we have to identify with the artist's greater mission, and the more we do identify with the artist's greater mission, the less the music needs to reinvent the wheel. And the same thing happens in the bottom pyramid of the diamond. But instead of connecting with a brand or a larger-than-life figure or a mission or a world, the human connection that we're having with these smaller artists is with the human themselves, with the individual, with the person. You know, we're talking about artists like Jane Remover, we're talking about artists like Quadeca, we're talking about Action Bronson. You know, these are artists that are niche enough and have their own authentic voice that they're able to express very clearly, hence, you know, good quality music. But at the same time, we're less interested in if the music is good or not. We're more interested in if the music is a gateway to that person's life. We want to connect with this person. We want to see what their interests are. We want to see what kind of sound represents them the most. All of a sudden, mistakes in their music or shortcomings start to feel less like failures or points where we can't connect. And they become more like windows into their artistic growth. You know, we see these shortcomings as, here's something for you to learn next time. Here's where they can go into their next album. I'm invested in this artist to see their growth. And as you reach the absolute bottom of this diamond graph, the music is absolutely no longer a product that you want to listen to just to have fun or just on a music level. You are connecting entirely with the person. It's like you're in the room with them. It's like you're talking to them. You're friends with them. You are listening to develop your relationship with that person. And at that point, we get to see music as the output of a human being that just wants to express themselves, and music is the way that they do that. And you as the audience get a window into their life. This sort of dynamic reveals to us the position of music journalism in the modern era. For those albums that sit in the middle, yes, absolutely, we want to see these albums reviewed, we want to see these albums tested for their quality. But when it's either an album that sits right at the top of this scale, like Carti, where the quality of the music is obsolete, and again, if it sits in the bottom half, where we care how much of a window we get into this person's world and how invested we are in it, then at that point, that 1 to 10 rating of an album doesn't really matter. You probably don't know the album that sits at the bottom of the chart, unless you're one of West Air's loyal 26 monthly listeners. But if you'd like to make a new connection, I'd love to tell you the story of how I discovered 2 incredible musicians coming all the way from Missouri in America. So without further ado, click on the video on the end screen to get a window into the lives of West Air members Seabrain and Gowlish. Thank you very much for watching, and see you soon!